I know it's a bold claim to make, but like, hear me out. I've been thinking a lot about how sister location might be incredibly relevant very soon in Five Nights at Freddy's, as in the next game. And recently, I got 2 questions to the podcast that might show us exactly what we're going to see in that next game. And if they're right, it could shake up everything we thought we knew about sister location and what William Afton's goals for that facility were. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. Now, I already hear some of you. For where we are in the story, why would we be going back to sister location? Well, it actually has a lot to do with what we see at the end of Security Breach Ruin. And frankly, I've talked about this plenty on the channel, so I'll be very brief, but we should, for the sake of today's video, go over it. At the end of Ruin, we see Cassie running away from the FNAF 6 location through a series of caves and ending up in a room with a scooper. Now, not every room that has a scooper is going to be the sister location scooper. And frankly, this machine looks a lot different than this machine, which I went over in this video, and you can see right here, there's actually a good reason for it. But it seems likely that whatever this facility is, it was at one point the sister location bunker, and we get that from the layout we learn within Secret of the Mimic. In that game, we learn that this entire facility was built by Edwin Murray an incredibly long time ago, all a part of Murray's costume manor, and the secret experiments he was doing with the Mimic at the time. But he built the entire fake pizzeria we see in FNAF 6. He built the tunnel system that connects it to sister location, because he built underground laboratories underneath what would eventually become the FNAF 4 house. This plot of land that MCM is on eventually becomes the plot of land the Pizzaplex is on. And if we look at a house on a hill, well, what does that look like besides the FNAF 4 house? And since we know sister location is underground somewhere near the FNAF 4 house, the fact that there are a series of underground laboratories right next to the house that becomes the FNAF 4 house, it all is so direct. It's basically confirmed that this layout was reused by William. I know this is a lot to just throw out so rapidly, but all I'm trying to say is that there is a lot of precedent that FNAF 6 and sister location are connected, or are at least nearby facilities underground that were at one point connected via tunnel. So if we see Cassie running away from the FNAF 6 location underground and not coming above ground, but ending up in a facility with a scooper, it is pretty fair to assume that she ended up in some version of sister location. But that's old news. I've been saying that. Plenty of people have been saying that. Why might this next game that could take place at this location change everything we know about Five Nights at Freddy's? Well, with a fairly subtle and sneaky, but incredibly likely retcon. One that, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean we were wrong about anything, doesn't materially change anything, but recontextualizes what we thought we knew, and includes the new lore we've just received. Alright, I've teased it enough. What the hell am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that only 40% of you guys are actually subscribed. So it is completely free to do, and it really helps out the channel if you could just drop a sub. I do this every week. I got editors to pay. Please, if you can, like, comment, and subscribe. It does wonders more than you know. Okay, though, for real, like, get to the point. Recently, on the Freddy Fazbear Pizza podcast, the weekly podcast I have on this very channel, I answered 2 questions that, when combined, could not only be fully accurate to the next FNAF game, but like I've been saying, if they're true, it changes everything. So what are these questions? The first one is from Unusual Carrot, and he reads, Proto-Freddy's, the prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizza we see in Secret of the Mimic, is the sister location observation room. I'm not going to go over all of my evidence for this, would be one long email, but here are some bullet points to get you started. Identical layout and theorized to be in the same location. Help Wanted 2's Princess Quest being a literal direct foreshadowing. William's discovery of F10N4 kickstarting a base of operations. Everything already pointing to sister location 2 being the next game. All being said, I believe it makes perfect narrative sense, having shown us the humble beginnings in Secret of the Mimic to what became of the horrors of sister location. In other words, this theory is supposing that the room we play in the ending of Secret of the Mimic, that prototype Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, is the same room we can see on the cameras in the Entered Night and Custom Night of sister location, to the point that the private office itself is the security office F10N4 is inside of. And truth be told, at first, I was not too sure of this theory, because on one hand, there is a lot of merit to it. As is mentioned, the layout is frighteningly similar. This is the camera layout of sister location, and this is a top-down view of the prototype Freddy's Pizzeria in Secret of the Mimic. They both have the private office, a hallway on either side, a side room for each hallway, connected to a larger room at the top, and a vertical vent in the middle. Granted, this is not exact, I want to be clear on that. The vent isn't exactly the same, and the prototype Freddy's Pizzeria is a lot larger than the room we see in Sister Location. Now, these are minor issues, and there are ways to work around it that we'll go into, but I just want you to not think that I'm blind. I see the differences. As he wrote, Princess Quest 4 is another great piece of evidence. I mean, the fact is, it's a minigame that starts in the FNAF 6 location, goes underground in the game, and then to exit it, you have to take the Sister Location elevator up. Inexplicably, you're in this minigame in this digital world, and then suddenly, the Sister Location elevator. That's weird, and they never explain it. But maybe this is the explanation. Now, I've already mentioned in this very video that it seems incredibly likely the next thing we're going to do in the FNAF timeline is go and rescue Cassie, who was last seen around these ruins, which are likely to be Sister Location. Add that onto the fact that I discussed here that Scott gave us a teaser for what they're working on. A sequel, specifically not a 3, a 2. So not Help Wanted 3, and realistically looking at the franchise, it only makes sense to be either Sister Location 2, Security Breach 2, or FNAF World 2. And as much as you should always bet on FNAF World 2, right now I think Sister Location 2 makes by far the most sense. There's all this potential lore in this area that Cassie was last seen in. Not to mention, like Unusual Carrot said in his email, there's way more evidence than just these 4 bullet points. Take, for example, the minigame selection of Help Wanted 2. It's unclear exactly what the minigames are. Like, in Help Wanted, we are very clear from the start this is all a VR game, but Help Wanted 2 seems to be taking place in the real world, so in that case, what are the minigames we're accessing on this computer? Are they security camera footage? Are they memories of the player? We're not sure about that. Regardless, it's interesting to note that an entire section of it is inexplicably dedicated to Sister Location. There are FNAF 6 minigames sprinkled in, it's the nurse minigames. There are Fall Fest minigames sprinkled in, which is strange, but sure. And the majority of the minigames are things that could have happened at the PizzaPlex to begin with. That all makes somewhat sense. Then why is it that the, going by the layout, last section of the game is entirely dedicated to Sister Location? To the extreme that if you're going for a normal playthrough where you collect all the presents, the last minigame you would play if you're going in order from left to right, top to bottom, like normal humans do, the last minigame is a boss fight against Circus Baby, arguably the main character of Sister Location, and arguably the main antagonist of Help Wanted 2. I mean, hell, the game starts with a shadow silhouette jump scare of Circus Baby. Why is she so present here? But if this is the room connected to the private office of Sister Location, suddenly that influence makes a lot more sense. Now, admittedly, at first, one of my big hesitations with this theory was this room double dipping. The idea that this room is almost guaranteed to be the FNAF 6 fake pizzeria. I mean, when we see it in Sister Location, it's on lock. Everything inside of there is stuff you could have purchased during the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria simulator. And then in Ruin, we go in the rooms around this room, and there's burner rooms, rooms with these big fiery burners at the bottom, which would have been perfect for Henry Emily's plan. Something to lure everybody in and burn them up. So if this room is meant to be the FNAF 6 pizzeria, which is all but guaranteed, then it can't also be the private office for Sister Location, right? That was my main hesitation when I first read this question, but as I think about it more and more, who's to say it can't? Sure, if we're just going off the layout map of Sister Location, this room is too small, admittedly. But there are ways around that. This map is anywhere from 5 years to decades later, so maybe the room was renovated, maybe not all the room was fully needed, maybe the map's not accurate, maybe it's a small retcon. We can't not consider the possibility that it makes more sense story-wise for this to be the same room, and if the only issue is that on the cameras the map size isn't correct, that's a pretty small retcon in the grand scheme of things. And then if we go off of visuals, it fits perfectly fine. I didn't realize this because I didn't play that much Custom Night from Sister Location, to be honest, but the rooms we see through the cameras of Custom Night are already kind of pizzeria themed. The floor has checker tile on it. The walls have that classic Freddy strip along the side of it. So it already kinda looks like a pizzeria. Why can't it be the same pizzeria? Now I do hear another counterpoint. If the FNAF 6 pizzeria is the sister location private office area, why would Molten Freddy and Scrap Baby come back? Wasn't the entire point of sister location that the funtimes are so sick and tired of being stuck down here, they would do anything to get out? Why would the next place they go to be right back down to the bunker? Well, they both have proper motivation because they both think William Afton's down there. Circus Baby, or at that point in the timeline, Scrap Baby, is dead set on helping her father, William Afton, accomplish his plans. She thinks his goal is to put everyone back together and bring them all back to life, and she'll do anything to accomplish it. We hear her say this directly at the ending of FNAF 6. Everyone remembers the peak monologue that Henry gives at the end of Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator. But a lot of us sometimes forget that monologue starts with connection terminated for a reason. First, Elizabeth is yapping. It begins with Scrap Baby going on about how we fell right into a trap. This was all for William. William's gonna put us all back together. This was all his doing. And then she's told how misinformed she had been. But she came here willingly. She thought that William Afton was here, and part of the grand design was to get to William Afton so he can fix everybody. So then that's why she would go down there. She thinks William's down there. It's all part of the plan. She might not have even wanted to leave the bunker in the first place. She might just have wanted to seek out William Afton. Molten Freddy, on the other hand, is a bit different. But to be fair, Molten Freddy, at least from the death lines we get in FNAF 6, seems to be fairly aware of the familial relations here. You know, we got the, a big happy family, a bunch of mentions like that, I hope I'm not late to the party. And similarly, if Molten Freddy is the thing that becomes the blob, which seems most likely, then we know that Molten Freddy wants desperately to kill William Afton. Which, you know, we could have probably assumed anyway. It is kind of the funtime animatronics that he tortured, filled with souls of kids he killed. This thing does not like William Afton. And if Molten Freddy thinks William Afton is down here, I would not doubt if that's the reason it so willingly comes. After all, Molten Freddy seems to be fairly agile in this weird, wiry form. It might be able to sneak back out once it kills William Afton now, or at least think that it can. So even if FNAF 6 and the sister location observation room are the same room, then these characters still have a reason to go down there. And this whole facility was put together by William Afton to accomplish his goals originally, and then was reused by Henry to accomplish his goals. But we know what Henry's goals are, to put an end to all of this. The question is, if this truly was a massive pizzeria that we now know that it is, what were William Afton's goals? Why would he do all of this? Well, that goes into one of the pieces of evidence from this email, and majorly into the evidence of the other email I've yet to bring up. What was that other email I received? Truth be told, this email is actually about a different question, but it's the context this person gives about their question that I want to discuss today. The question was sent in by Ginger on the Patreon, and it reads, so I've had this theory rattling around in my head for a while, that an upcoming game might reveal / retcon that Ennard was the Mimic all along. We know that the first 6 in-universe games were based on some amount of truth, but could have been influenced by misinformation or creative misinterpretation. And I can see how the Mimic could have been creatively interpreted to be an amalgamation of robot parts and spirits rather than a complex AI endoskeleton. And to me, this is very interesting. Now, straight away, frankly, I don't fully agree that Ennard could just be the Mimic. These seem like too much of a separate character. We see the Mimic in Secret of the Mimic, and we see it in Ruin, and it looks generally the same the whole time. The idea that it looked like Ennard at any point doesn't super track. Not to mention the flowchart of Ennard to Molten Freddy to the Blob makes too much sense for it to be the Mimic, and then Molten Freddy came out of nowhere and then turned into the Blob out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't add up. But what is worthwhile to bring up, and what does get me thinking from this question, is to think about what the funtime animatronics truly are. They're incredibly advanced animatronics, capable of mimicking speech, with exoskeletons that can morph around a bit, and endoskeletons that are able to move throughout the exoskeleton, move outside of the exoskeleton, form together, and change their shape enough to fit inside of Michael Afton. Do you see where I'm going with this? I don't think that Ennard is the Mimic, but it seems like the funtimes were made in the Mimic's image. So what does this mean? And what would we learn in this new FNAF game that changes everything? Well, let's put our evidence into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. Once all that mimic nonsense was settled and the secret was out, William went to collect his spoils to see exactly what he had purchased, surveying the land and the facilities inside of it, and he found more than he dreamed he ever could, namely F10N4, a supercomputer which seemingly housed a perfect recreation of the mind and personality of Edwin Murray's late wife, Fiona. Quick aside, I know and you know that F10N4 is not a perfect replica of Fiona. F10N4 is way more robotic and servient to Edwin, but let's be real, it was the 70s, William probably didn't know the difference. Okay, that's all, I just wanted to be clear about that. Not to mention the mimic itself. I mean, an endoskeleton this strong that can fit into any animatronic suit it wants to, that can mimic any voice and personality you give it or show it, that would print money for William Afton's business. Because keep in mind, at this point in the timeline, as far as we're aware, no killings have taken place. Sure, some employees have died because William Afton is an incredibly scummy businessman, but he's not an outright murderer yet. His main goal is probably still to have a successful pizzeria, and the mimic seems like a golden ticket to that opportunity. So now he has F10N4 and this M2 endoskeleton, and needs to understand exactly how they work so he can thrive his business. So right here, William Afton sets up his base of operations, the private office, the same room that F10N4 is already in, to study the mimic, learn how it works, and try to make one of his own. He leaves the mimic in this pizzeria, the pizzeria that it already enjoys being in. I mean, think about the bad ending for Secret of the Mimic. When it catches us and kills us, it puts us into an animatronic and lights up the show and just stares at us. I think the mimic genuinely enjoys being in here to an extent, and this is something that F10N4 likely knows and could have told William Afton, so he can study it from the safety of the private office. Which is why this private office is set up to observe and defend itself from the rooms in front of it, because you're defending yourself from the fake pizzeria the mimic was once housed in. And it's right here that the funtimes were developed. William Afton was obsessed with making this mimic. For one, like I mentioned, it prints money. But I wouldn't doubt if part of it is jealousy. We know how William Afton acts in the books when he realizes that Henry Emily is a better inventor than he is. He becomes obsessed with Henry and tries to do what he did and fails. I'd bet that William Afton is doing the same thing with Edwin. The mimic is something William could never create on his best day, but he drives himself crazy trying to recreate it, trying to make his own to prove not only that he can, but that he's better than Edwin Murray. He didn't need him anyway. And his best attempt was the funtime animatronics, endoskeletons that can somewhat change their shape as well, ones that can mimic voices, ones that have set personalities, but not quite to the tier of the mimic. At the end of the day, Funtime Freddy is Funtime Freddy, and they're not able to put on every other animatronic suit they'd want to, but they can move around a little bit. They can slither around and change their shape slightly. I mean, look at the Funtime endoskeleton. This thing looks insane. Like, we don't talk enough about how weird the Funtime endoskeletons are. Look at Endo 01, Endo 02. That's an endoskeleton. It's bare bones, it's metal plating, it does what it needs to. Is this a realistic endoskeleton? I don't know. Do I look like a scientist? No. I'm in a goddamn 10 by 10 office recording videos about FNAF theories. I don't know robotics. But what I do know is this kinda looks real, and this looks like insane tubing. So maybe this is why. Maybe the funtimes are William Afton's best attempt at recreating the mimic, and it's precisely because of that that allows them to, much later in the timeline, shed their exoskeletons and form into Ennard. Their endoskeletons might not be fully malleable in the weird way that the mimic is, but they're able to conglomerate and form one body, and then change the shape of that body to fit inside of Michael Afton. That sounds a lot like a mimic. Now, I'm not saying Ennard is the mimic. This endoskeleton, I do believe, is a separate entity, but I think it is devilishly ironic that Edwin's best invention is still holding pretty strong 50 years later, but William's best attempt at recreating it not only failed, but then was sent to the same place the Mimic was, in a non-canon ending, and eventually degenerates and transforms into Molten Freddy into the Blob into something that would become William Afton's true downfall. A mass of wires dedicated to making sure he stays dead. And I think this is what we're going to learn in the next Five Nights at Freddy's game. Sister Location 2. Going through the old ruins of the Sister Location bunker and seeing it for what it really is. Seeing how it was connected to the FNAF 6 pizzeria, as it was all a part of that original underground facility built by Edwin Murray. Hell, maybe the FNAF 4 experiment chambers are somewhere nearby too. It's all been connected, way before child possession was involved. Well, I guess not fully, because David is a whole situation. But the remnant experiments, while they happened here, they happened much later. At first, it was just William and his obsession with not being the second best inventor under the Fazbear brand. So, that's the theory. The idea that Sister Location was much more connected to the FNAF 6 pizzeria than we ever thought, and that in doing so, William Afton was trying to recreate the Mimic, which is where he created the Funtime animatronics. It makes a lot of sense the more you look at it, and the more you look at it, the more evidence comes to light that backs up that claim, especially if our next game is going to be Sister Location 2, where we could learn all about this and finally understand why William Afton was down in that bunker in the first place. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I think this is a really damn good theory, and I'd love to know if you agree or disagree. In the meantime, I mentioned a couple times that we have evidence knowing what the next FNAF game is going to be. I expound fully on that evidence in this theory. It was a chat message Scott put in Dawko's livestream chat. Hey guys, can we advertise the games maybe, instead of just talking in a live stream? You're a big company, you can afford marketing. Anyway. And a huge thank you to the patrons who help support this channel in spite of the fluctuating ad rates of YouTube. And a special shout out to Aiden, Marks, Sam Pinella, and Madison Esmond, our breadwinners of the week. And until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.